Hello and welcome to the front page, the show looking back on all the racing news, and what a week we have to start. It's Glorious Goodwood and the Galway Festival. We'll be looking in detail at those two meetings, as well as Saturday's King George, where Calandagan was the big winner on Saturday. It's also a key point for the future of horse racing. We're going to find out a bit more about the alarming figures that could influence the sport, could affect the sport from the racing tax. The will he won't he saga of Lord Allen continues. Perhaps we're going to find out even more this week, and some major changes to Premier Racing. Joining me on the show to discuss the hot topics are Chris Cook and Liam Head. And before we get stuck in, I'm going to give a shout out to this. This is the big kickoff. The football season starts this weekend, and we have you covered with an absolutely stellar guide to all the big divisions, placings across all the football leagues, including European leagues as well. And we'll just have a quick mention. The verdict's out, Liam, Manchester United fan. The Racing Post say you're going to finish 8th. Happy with that? Would you take that right now?
I'd take that, yeah. Right now I'd take it based on what happened last season. So a lot of change that's happened in the summer. Be interesting to see how the new players sort of bed into the team. Yeah, bring it on, I think.
And Chris, beloved Hibs, happy with third placing in the standings?
No, we're definitely going to beat Rangers and Celtic. Yeah, but I mean, we did third last season. Be great to do it again. Maybe get into Europe, see what happens.
We'll see. Well, they've got Newport County finishing last in League Two, so they've definitely got that wrong, hopefully. Let's go on to the King George. A brilliant winner on Saturday for Calandagan, the horse who kept finishing second in all the big races. Well, he's had 2 Group 1s now. He's certainly turned the corner. Chris, you discussed the race in your column. What was your verdict?
Well, it's a funny looking race, kind of unsatisfactory, really, unless you particularly enjoy, seeing tactics that you never expected to be deployed like that. So you got a 5-runner race, and the way it worked out was against the chances of 3 of them, maybe. But that being said, Calandagan has, finished that race, in a really impressive style, and he sort of now looks like the proper champion we were kind of expecting him to become. And, he had excuses when he was getting beat last year, and then he got beat again in the Coronation Cup, and doubt started to creep in. But a couple of wins later, I think he's in some good books again.
Certainly is. Liam, you were there on the ground for us. Not only did we learn a bit more about Calandagan, we also saw Kalpana on a cracking race in second. What was your verdict across all 5 runners?
Yeah, it was. I think what we anticipated the race being like was we'd expect a pacemaker from Ballydole in continuous. We didn't get that, so to speak. It was very strange. I mean, Jan Bruegel didn't really look that settled earlier in the race, so they sort of had to ditch that plan. Rebels Romance was kind of the unfortunate.
I was really, really gutted for him.
Yeah, he just didn't get the space at all. He got absolutely trapped in under William Buick.
And he needed a strong pace anyway. But I was sort of thinking, the form he was in coming into the race, had they gone the pace you expected, he wasn't going to beat Calandagan probably. But if it had been a different type of race, he'd have run better.
Someone had to make the run, and Kalpana obviously did that, and I just ran an absolute cracker. Again, we've seen her run really well it 2 times at the Curragh this season already. I think on we did get a bit of rain before the races on Saturday. Not too much to change any going, but I think sort of on softer ground, that's when we'll see it to better effect. I thought she ran a cracking race, so well in defeat, but it was a well judged ride from Miguel Barcelona, and the patience that he needed for that ride. I thought he'd left it too late for Calandagan to make the run, but the speed he showed, on that straight was just magical, and deserves it, after a couple of sort of below par performances.
Yeah, and I suppose he's back to that form of the City of Troy race last year, so close to the City of Troy. We know where he can't run, Chris. Calandagan is a standout middle distance horse in Europe now, for sure. But we're not going to see him in the standout middle distance race. The question opens again. Should the geldings be allowed in the Arc?
Well, I think so, and it does make a bit of a nonsense of it, doesn't it, when you consider so the King George is like Britain's nearest equivalent to the Arc, right? And it's a race that should naturally lead on to the Arc, and the last 2 winners are horses who are specifically barred from taking part in the Arc. If they're good enough for Ascot, why aren't they good enough for Longchamp? It seems to me that the Arc is a race that we all love, I think. We all want it to be the best race it can possibly be. You like it to bring together all the different strands of form at the end of the season and have all those big races represented. So I think they're making a mistake, and it's harming their own race. I'd love to see Calandagan in that race. And then on a different surface, you can see why other people might still be keen to take him on despite what he's done on Saturday.
Yeah, and I suppose there's a bit of an irony as well, is that Japan are so desperate to win the Arc, they keep continuing to put horses in there.
Yes.
And actually some of our best horses, including Goliath, who won the King George last year, goes and runs in the Japan Cup because he can't run in the showpiece event in Europe.
I mean, it feels like we're handing them something that's really valuable, Anyway, yeah. I mean, it's up to the French authorities, but they said earlier this year, not for this year, which I guess leaves the door ajar, as it were, to change in the future. I mean, everybody's conscious of the ratings that these races are attracting each year, and you want to keep that high. You want to be able to say that ours was the best race in the world.
Yeah.
So I think they are probably going to change that at some point.
I think you're right. To play devil's advocate, Liam, they do say it's about the breed, and by perhaps letting geldings in, the breed of the horses might be affected. Where do you stand on that topic?
I think I agree with Chris. I think it's a very strange rule to have. It's the Arc is dubbed arguably the greatest flat race in Europe, and you want the best horses to all turn up and face each other. Now, if the rule wasn't there, there's every chance we'll see a rematch with Kalpana and Calandagan again. I think even Francois Graffard said after the race on Saturday that even he's sort of baffled by the decision to not let geldings run in the race, given that Calandagan would have been probably favourite for the race on the back of what he did on Saturday.
Definitely would have to be, wouldn't he?
Now, all of a sudden, Kalpana's favourite. She was backed in from, I think, 14s to about 8 to 1 for the race. You want, it's the showpiece spectacle in French racing on the flat, so you want the very best to compete, and it's obviously disappointing that there is that sort of roadblock in the way for geldings.
Yeah. I think that betting on the Arc this year is really interesting because like right up to the weekend, it was like 14 to 1 the field, like as if we were betting on a Grand National. Like people really had no clue, and it's like they're latching onto Kalpana with kind of gratitude. Oh, thank goodness we got a standout contender. But arguably, what happened on Saturday is that there were two horses that were suited by the way that race was run, and she's got beat. Despite being one of the two.
I'd also say that there's perhaps people grappling onto the fact she's got the absolute perfect prep in compared to what happened last year at Bluestock, who finished second. King George went and won the Arc and had won that fillies race at Ascot. So people are looking at her same connections. It must be the same way.
I think with Kalpana as well, I think she will be better suited to a bit more juice in the ground. And naturally speaking, over the last few years, October time at Longchamp has sort of been that sort of ground. So in a sense, it was the perfect prep. Obviously, you would have liked to have won the King George, but she gave away absolutely. She was absolutely fantastic, really, in defeat.
I can't help feeling, as a value-seeking punter, that there must be some cracking value in that art market somewhere. Unfortunately, there's about 10 different horses you could make a case for if you're sort of really working hard to put a
Next
case
time
together.
you're in the studio, Chris Cook, we will have Chris Cook's value selection for the Arc. He's put pressure on himself. We mentioned about the Arc and a lot of price. It's probably because there isn't a real standout 3-year-old in there. We're going to have a real standout 3-year-old at Glorious Goodwood in Field of Gold, who's of course a star attraction in the Sussex Stakes. Some are calling it a bit of a jewel in the Downs with Rosalian. Maybe he's too good, maybe he's not. He is the star attraction at Glorious Goodwood, there's no doubt about it. Chris, how good is Field of Gold?
You don't quite know where the top of him is, but based on what we saw at Ascot, he's a huge talent and maybe still getting better and better. There's an interesting wrinkle, which is they had a pacemaker from the last 2 runs, which seemed to help him, right? That coincides with the improved form that he's been showing. And personally, I'm thoroughly in favour of pacemakers who do a pacemaking job and actually go out in front as they're supposed to do. But so it was Windlord before, and he, it worked with him. And now you've got a different horse from a different stable making the running for him, or we expect that that's what he's going to do. It's Kirat, who was second in the Victoria Cup. And he's got Goodwood form. I think that maybe is why they've chosen him for this race. I think he won there twice last year. But he doesn't. It's not like he's always a front runner. So it's just something a little bit new, and you can't quite anticipate, whether that's going to work or not. If you're looking to bet against the favourite, there's one potential straw in the wind that would give you hope. And then there's always the Goodwood factor, depending on how many horses turn up. There's always trouble in running waiting for somebody.
And we are taking on older horses for the first time. Rosallion Liam is going to be a massive contender as well. He's clearly a very top-class miler. It's going to be a cracking race on Wednesday. Any reason to take on Field of Gold? And is he the star attraction that some may see him as?
Field of Gold, I think, is we've touched on this show many times, is probably one of the most, if not the most exciting flat horse in training at the moment, given that what we've seen him do, the way that he's taken to his races. I think even in the Irish Guineas, it was just a matter of clicking the button and letting him do his thing. I just think he's been so well trained by the Gosdens, and he's just so exciting. So he is obviously the star of probably the week at Glorious Goodwood. Now, Rosallion's probably one of the biggest tests he will face. We're still waiting for Rosallion to get back to the very best that we've seen him, from last season. Obviously, I think he was third in the Lockinge. So we're still sort of waiting to see where, if he can come up again and sort of return to the very top. I know that Sean Levy was very bullish of his lad's chances in an interview with the Racing Post the other day. So it should be, should be a cracking race.
I was trying to put together a case for Carl Spackler.
Okay.
Who he ran in the Queen Anne and was sort of half fancied. I think he was 15-2 in the end. But they went a steady pace and he over-raced and didn't see it out. This will be a different race, right? Instead of a stiff racecourse, you've got a racecourse that should suit fast horses, and we hope they'll go proper pace. And it's his second run in Britain. You hopefully have acclimated and settled down and be a bit more comfortable here. You could see him, running significantly better than he did at the Royal Meeting, and people have just put a line through him. I think he's 33-1. Maybe it'll shorten now that one or two will come out at the final stage. But there's some potential there for me to lose some money.
There we go.
I think just as well, obviously it's interesting that William Buick has been given the leg up. Obviously no Godolphin runner in the race, and Colin Keane obviously serving a ban. So that's just a bit more pressure to add to the sort of story.
New jockey, always. There's a potential trapdoor there, isn't there?
Yeah, especially at Goodwood. Yeah. I mean, we've seen that in the past. It's a funny merry-go-round, the Field of Gold jockey story, and it's got another saga on Wednesday. Loads of other themes to look at. I mean, Illinois, will he get his revenge in the Goodwood Cup? We, of course, had brilliant Royal Ascot for Wafnan. Godolphin were fantastic at the July Festival, and Aidan O'Brien and Coolmore were really good in the 2-year-old races at Royal Ascot. So the big guns, who's going to emerge on top at Goodwood? And of course at Galway, perhaps a little bit of a different theme, Chris in particular. I mean, we talk a lot about big trainers. It's all about Willie Mullins. It's Irish racing. It's Willie Mullins. You look at the top of the betting in these races. It's quite a diverse mix of trainers, which is a pleasant change in jump racing.
Yeah, it's because it's not really Willie's time of year, is it? You sort of think that this is. I mean, he still gets winners, obviously, but he's not sort of firing the big guns until December time. So yeah, really, if he's going to give other people in Irish racing a chance, he should be on holiday at this time of year. But I dare say he'll win his fair share. No, it's great fun having that mix of Goodwood and Galway, and sort of there's enough action to sort of keep you busy all day long. I must say personally, I find Galway very difficult, which won't stop me having a go in races like the Plate and so on.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's. Some of those winners are hard to see coming.
Certainly are. It's a tough 7 days. If you're managing to do all 7 days, then you have all of our respects from here, because I've done one day and that almost finished me off. So enjoy Galway. Just back to Goodwood. I want one thing to watch at Goodwood, and your best bet. Starting with you, Liam.
My best bet would probably be Red Orange for Clive Cox in the sprint handicap on Tuesday, so tomorrow at the time of recording. Really solid performer this season, He was unlucky to finish, finish just 3 quarters behind the winner at Ascot last time. Ran a cracker in the at the Royal Meeting in the Palace of Holyrood House, and Clive Cox is in really good form. So I think he can sort of perform well again and go close.
And what's the Lambourn Eye? What's caught your eye from things to look out for? Might not be a horse, a theme, something.
The things that, I mean, Ed Walker is doing really well, and looks to have his biggest team going to the meeting this year, which is a statement in itself. The likes of Ten Bob Tony, Noble Champion, if they go, he's obviously got a nice youngster called River Spey as well who could run. So he had a very strong Royal Ascot by his standards. Interestingly, I was there for a media morning last week, and believe it or not, Ed Walker's only ever had 1 winner at the Glorious Goodwood.
Wow.
And that was in his first year of his full training in 2015. So his record, he was the first to admit his record's not very good there, but given the fact that he's done really well at the Royal Meeting, he's in good form at the minute, I think he's bound to have a couple of good chances.
Due a change of luck, right?
What's yours, Chris?
The thing to look out for that I think is interesting anyway, I wouldn't bet on him, is Windlord, who we were just talking about. He's been pacemaking for Field of Gold, but they got a win out of him at Sandown, and now he's going for the Gordon Stakes on Thursday. So it's like they're trying to show him as a good horse in his own right. Not a betting proposition, but it's an interesting idea. There's been a few pacemakers over the years for various big-time horses who then went on and won a decent prize on their own. The Nassau, I think, is also on Thursday. It's a really interesting race. I was thinking Bedtime Story, but I mean, I don't quite know yet what Aidan's going to commit to the race. But
of course, the big favourite and a banker according to Graham Rodway in the show.
Is it really? Okay, well, I mean, if she turned up in that race, or anywhere she turns up next, she's going to be really interesting. She was, so good last year at Royal Ascot, and then that couldn't repeat that immediately. But last time in the Prix de Diane, looking top class again. So
could be a bit of value. And was that yours to look out for and your best bet?
So that's my best bet if she turns up.
Okay.
But yeah, you have to wait and see Dex first.
Yeah, we would. The thing I would point to, and it's a little bit niche, is that I quite like the emerging trend of horses that are sort of late flourishing 3-year-olds, and they tend to appear in either the Thoroughbred Stakes or the Gordon Stakes. See a lot of horses sort of on a late trajectory,
type of thing.
That type of exactly that type of horse. It's becoming more common, and we all look towards the classic form as the 3-year-old form. It's got to be the classic form. It's a new trend emerging. A few good horses prop up, so maybe 1 or 2 will emerge from that. So we're going to move from the racecourse to the industry news, and of course the big story continues to be the racing tax, with, as we found out this week or last week, thousands of jobs and £330 million in lost revenue is what the BHA are expecting if the racing tax goes ahead. In case you haven't heard, this is of course the government plans to harmonise the tax rates that online gambling are set at. Racing and sports betting are currently at 15%, but they're going to be raised to 21% level with casino under new plans. We already know how big of an impact it's having. Many members from the racing industry across the board have said how big a significant problem this is going to threat, but we had some more detail from independent modelling commissioned by the BHA, and acting BHA chief Brant Junche said this is one of the gravest risks to horse racing the sport has ever faced. 2,752 jobs will be lost according to the model in Yorkshire. Just as an example, a key horse racing base would face a £37 million hit. This is Liam. We talked about Yorkshire, mentioned there as a key training base. You are a Lambourn correspondent, so you know word on the ground. Another sign of how significant a threat this is.
It is. It's a massive threat. I mean, not just to the sport itself, but to the livelihood of many people's lives. It's not. You don't have to be under a rock to realise how big the sport of horse racing is for employment in Britain and Ireland, especially in these training centres like Lambourn. So many people could be affected by the news of this tax harmonisation. So it's crucial that and it's been great to see so many people stand in unity with this, which is when everyone's on this sort of singing from the same hymn sheet, that it's really good that everyone comes together. But it's so crucial we stop this, because without stable staff, stable lads, lasses, what is the sport? These horses can't sort of be catered for on a day-to-day basis.
Exactly, and there's a comment from Sarah Guest, who's a senior member of John O'Shea, a small yard, a grassroots yard in Gloucestershire, fair to say. If the industry starts shrinking, it'll be stable staff like me who will feel it first. So, Chris...
Did you say 2,000 jobs lost in Yorkshire?
2,700 jobs across the board, and then independently in Yorkshire, they'd have a £37 million hit. So not just Yorkshire, that'd be across the industry.
I was just, even so saying that's across the industry, I'm just trying to imagine what kind of sport we'd have left if you took a bite like that out of it. You can't help feeling that what survives that would be so heavily impacted, as to be losing its public appeal. It could be quite a steep downward trajectory from that point onwards. You'd have to think that any responsible government faced with this kind of disaster scenario is going to do the responsible thing and leave it alone. We had the Prime Minister's wife, I think, pictured at Ascot on Saturday having a great time. So hopefully they're aware of what success British racing is, but equally, how under pressure it is, how we're in need of significant government support and not a hurdle like this that's going to take us out of the knees.
And the challenge continues to be, racing seems to be aware of how much of a threat this is, and I suppose it's in terms of getting the government to see that it's not just an issue relating to gambling, it's got a huge knock-on effect, and it's whether that message is quite going to be seen across. So you really hope that Mrs. Starmer has gone home and said, Kia, come on, sort it out. I had a great day, don't ruin it.
Surely someone at Ascot has said to her, by the way, hopefully you are aware, but I feel sure they are aware. You'd have to say racing could not have been more clear about the damage this is going to do, and hopefully we're taken seriously.
But it's like a domino effect, isn't it? We've mentioned, you impact on the lives of these stable staff. The horses don't get the care. The owners start taking horses out because they're not trained, and it works its way across the whole industry. So something needs to sort of happen soon, because it affects everyone. Yeah,
well, latest on all of issues regarding racing tax, make sure to keep an eye on the Racing Post as this story continues to develop. Now, we're recording this on Monday, not far away from, as we're recording here in central London, the future of horse racing leadership is potentially being decided. That's because Lord Allen, who remains delayed as becoming the VHA's next chair, there's going to be a meeting at the moment, we think, between stakeholders to better inform his vision of the sport. Now, what's happened in the past? Well, Lord Allen basically delayed his start, saying he wanted time to look at the various impacts he'll have on horse racing and decide what he might do. He has given his list of proposals to the BHA and its various members and stakeholders to say, this is my intentions. Today, they essentially get the chance to go back and tell him what they think of his decisions. In the week, we've had some signs of what's to come. The Jockey Club chief, Jim Mullen, spoke publicly in favour, or he did say there are still things to iron out. But on the whole, a little bit of movement on this story, which, Chris, has been increasingly frustrating. Your column on Friday was about it and the importance of what damage that time can do in particular.
Yeah, so there's obviously some people who've been briefing in the background saying, time is the enemy, we need to have an answer now from Lord Allen. Are you going to do this job or not? I sort of, from what other people are saying, it sounds as though these backstage discussions are being fruitful to some degree. We're establishing where change is possible and where new agreements can be hammered out. So I sort of feel like saying, well, as long as there's movement there, keep talking, keep negotiating. For a guy who was only signed up to do 1 day's work a week, he's already had a really significant impact on the sport, and there's lots of folks saying it's a beneficial impact. Hopefully, the outcome, whether he signs up to be chairman or not, at the end of this, hopefully we're going to have a better form of governance that puts the sport in shape to deal with some of the threats that it's facing.
Yeah, it's one of the ideas that Lord Allen has put forward that we know of is that he's talking about making the BHA board completely independent and split the BHA in two, one side for regulatory issues and another for a commercial part. Now, he's spoken a bit about this commercial side. We're finding out little bits and pieces about it, including the words R1, which is taken from F1. Is R1 the way to go for British racing?
God, really, really not. And hopefully, again, somebody has said to him, yeah, it's a great idea, Charles, but that's not going to work. My fundamental problem with that is, I thought we were bringing him in to protect the sport that we already have. And it's got this storied tradition going back hundreds of years in the cases of some of our more important races. And a tradition hugely important in horse racing, particularly flat racing. When you're an owner or a breeder and you're trying to produce some sort of top quality 3-year-old, what you're hoping is that he can win some of the races that famous horses from decades and even hundreds of years ago were also winning, and try and show that he's in that kind of class. So I can't believe that he seriously thinks the best thing to do is to create some international series of top quality races that will take those horses out of, say, the Derby or the Eclipse of the King George, and go and compete in a series of races that maybe in Hong Kong or Dubai or Qatar or the US. Aside from all the familiar difficulties with being sure that the best horses can turn up for those races, in far-flung countries. You can do these things as jockey competitions, and indeed there's still talk of a global jockey challenge being put together. I'd be sceptical about that as well, to be honest. But the whole conversation sounds like a dead end to me. He needs to focus on the sport we already have, protecting that, hopefully restoring its health to some degree, and preparing us all for a brighter future, and don't get distracted by innovation.
Okay, stick with what we know. Liam, what's your verdict on events of Lord Allen?
Yeah, it's here we go again, isn't it? For me, I think that obviously we don't know what the outcome of the meeting is going to be today. I personally think the worst case scenario would be for this saga to just continue and have no, we don't know. Lord Allen can turn around and be like, right, I'm gonna take the role as it is, and we'll deal with everything. Or he could walk away. We'd have no idea. But I just think the longer this goes on, and the more it just sort of it invites more questions for everyone to have, more concerns that a lot of people have in this industry. So yeah, we need to start cracking the whip now and getting the ball rolling, really, to like Chris said, to protect the future of this sport.
But say he doesn't take the gig. Has this whole saga not made it sort of really unappealing for whoever else they might?
100%.
Yeah, I think going through the whole process again of the BHA trying to appoint someone, they've essentially trying to go through this whole process with egg on the face. Like, it's given the fact that someone's agreed to take the role, has said what needs to happen, and then has not taken the role, and they've got to do it all over again. So for the BHA, they need to protect their own back and get this over the line now. But at the same time, I was reading Lee's column, and it's obviously not, a lot of the stuff that he's been saying has not gone down well with a lot of the other members in the BHA, as you can imagine, because he's come in and he's basically crucified it. So it's in any direction you go, there's a roadblock, isn't there?
Yeah, he's come in and you said crucified. He's come in and looked at it and gone, well, this is exactly the vision I see, and I want to make a real change. To be fair, which is what his job is, really, isn't he? He's the leader, and he's promised to make changes.
Let me just sort of show you again how difficult it is to govern horse racing. That he's sort of, someone's mentioned to him, maybe you could be chair of the BHA, and he's like, oh yeah, that sounds fun, and sort of, let me just look at the fine print. Oh my God! So yeah, it's like an outsider's perspective, shows you what kind of state your sport's really in. But I like that he's not afraid to upset people and to speak his mind. Again, I think it must be a powerful incentive for the sport and for the BHA that if it doesn't work with him, it's going to be really difficult to get a high quality replacement. So there's a serious incentive there to try and make this work somehow.
Lots to learn. Well, we talk about change. We do know some change is coming in 2026. That's because Premier Racing is set for a drastic change. This is, of course, the initiative brought in at the start of last year, where certain meetings with good races and particularly good days of the calendar were marked as Premier meetings, so you could easily identify them as the top class in the sport. However, it hasn't quite been working like that. There was 167 meetings this year. in the first year, and they were told to be Premier Racing, and there wasn't quite clarity on what was Premier Racing. In 2026, it's going to be a more ruthless attitude. They're going to drop to 52. That's 32 flat meetings and 20 jumps to try and clearly define what is the top of the sport. Now, Chris, Premier Racing hasn't been the most straightforward topic going forward. We know before it started that there wasn't particularly much funding given to it just before it started. We were there on the first day it was launched, inverted commas, at Cheltenham, and there was a few signage around and a bit of a logo on a race card. It's not been the success, and many people are critical of Premier Racing, but at the same time it's not had the funding. Is this change going to save Premier Racing and push it forward to the direction it was hoped it would do?
Well, it's the right direction of travel, I guess, because it was like they wanted to identify the best races, the best race days, but they didn't really have the guts to go ahead and say it's just these ones. You know, they wanted to be fair to everybody. You know, there was a Southall Sunday recently where you're looking at it and going, well, why is this a Premier race day? And then, as you say, they launched it too soon. They hadn't really figured out what they wanted those days to look like. It didn't feel different when you were physically there at the races. To be honest, it never really appealed to me as something that was going to help us enormously. Because, you know, when you're a fan of the sport, you know what the big days are. You don't need to have that flagged up for you. And if you're not close enough to the sport to know that, then do you care if it's a Premier race day or not? You know, it probably passes you by completely. I can't help thinking it was just, you know, it was a bit of a waste of time and money from the start. I mean, Richard Wayman has pointed out that on the Premier race days that we've had already, the betting turnover is held up better than for other race days. It's not much of a brag that the betting turnover hasn't been as steep on those days as on others. You know, we want it to be going up. So yeah, I can't help thinking that, you know, by getting involved in that scheme, we've missed a chance to do something else that might have made some headway.
Yeah, one of the criticisms of Premier Race that was introduced was the 2-hour protected window on Saturdays. This is where essentially to avoid clustering on busy Saturdays and to keep able to clearly see if you're watching ITV racing or looking at the race cards, what's the clear best racing. It's going to be in this 2-hour protected slot on a Saturday. It was of course criticised because there is a lot of racing on a Saturday, as you touch on. For a lot of people, those Saturdays are music days, they're busy days, they get big crowds, and essentially they weren't allowed to race at that point, and their crowds were affected, some tracks really affected by that. That's going to be ditched. So that's good news for some tracks, because for all that you say, it's hard to identify what's a Premier meeting. For some people, going racing when there's music on, that would be an event. It wouldn't be necessarily about because this is a Premier race day. It's because there's a local artist, there's a cover band, there's someone on, and it's going to be a big party atmosphere. And those events were whittled down because of Premier racing, so that's positive. I
mean, there's some tracks that have been having to stage Saturday fixtures in the morning, you know. And
it's. I mean, that for me is just. It's ridiculous. I think.
Are they going to get an apology, or you know?
Was Musselburgh one of them? I think in the story that we did. I think, but you know, it has such a knock-on effect, doesn't it? You know, having your Saturday racing, you know, you're trying to attract the crowd on Saturday is hard work anyway. But trying to attract them when the first race is at 11 o'clock in the morning, I mean, you know, it has a knock-on effect in terms of betting turnover, attendances. It was, and you go to the other end of the 4 p.m. deadline. I know Chester is one of them that they had to move their racing. Their first race had to be moved to a sort of a mid-afternoon fixture. That sort of first race was at 4:30 or so on. But I find it. I was chatting to you, James, just on the way here today, and find it ironic how we have this 2 to 4 slot. But then the King George was at 4:10. Yeah. The July Cup last week was at 4:35. So I mean,
I think they had the Derby at 4:30.
Yeah. So it's I'd never understood the timing of it, but in terms of I do like the way that they're sort of tightening down now on it and reducing it, but. Usually you'd think that they'd go the other way and they'd start small and then go big.
You would, but let's talk about that, because 52 days, it's 32 on the flat, 20 on jumps. Well, 4 at Aintree, 4 at Cheltenham, 3 at Aintree. Yeah. That's 8 already. Yeah. It's 7. That's 7.
Good
Can't
maths.
even do the maths. God, it's going to be a long week. There's 7 days at Galway though. It's going to be pretty ruthless what makes the cut.
Yeah, I mean, and you look at those Cheltenham and Aintree, but there's some tracks that the majority of their fixtures will be Premier race day. Like Cheltenham, you'll have Trials Day. That'll probably be, well, and it probably won't because it's, well, we don't know.
Who knows?
It's grade ones on the jumps, isn't it? Is that what they're saying, that grade ones?
They probably are keying on the grade ones, aren't they? But
Yeah.
I mean, again, do you need that? Because it's always been the case that any Cheltenham race day gets a big push anyway. I mean,
exactly.
like you'll be on our front page, you know, great, we're Cheltenham racing today. So do you need an extra scheme to sort of get people excited about it? I would say no.
And you could give that to another track and give them a bit more emphasis on their big days. I don't know, but it's like you said, they've been ruthless cutting it down to this number, and it, like you say, you take out the big days, you take out the 5 days of Royal Ascot on the flat, and all of a sudden the list goes down.
I'd be more interested in hearing, about money being spent on promoting the sport, or promoting those days maybe in particular. We're doing all of this on a shoestring budget, it seems to me. And meanwhile, the sports promotional wing doesn't have a leader, so it's all going well.
Yeah, and it must be said as well is that for all that Premier Racing's helped to promote the sport, we're seeing in some racecourses have real success at attracting crowds through their own plans, their own businesses, their own campaigns, and there's been some great successes in the past and in recent weeks. So maybe it's not the job of Premier Racing to attract a crowd, maybe it's the job of a racecourse to attract their crowds on the big days and identify to them when they should come along and put up an offering which suits them.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's a lot of tracks that are doing very good things, and let's just hope that continues because it provides the sort of the atmosphere for everyone, doesn't it? Yeah.
We'll finish on a high. There is a new racing festival in 2025, the Welsh Racing Festival, so great to see that added to the calendar. There might not be a Premier Race Day, but delighted to see a 3-day meeting at Chepstow. Got to get that in right at the end. Right, that's the end of the show, and we don't have anything to go on the front page, but of course it would be Goodwood and Galway. Fantastic week to look forward to. Thank you very much for joining me in the studio, Chris Cook and Liam Head. Do make sure to look through the Racing Post YouTube channel and all our socials for coverage across Glorious Goodwood and Galway. If you're eager for a bit more Goodwood content, we've got the best bets on our postcast. We've got a special Glorious Goodwood show available now, as well as so much tipping, previews, insight, absolutely everything you know for all 90 races at Goodwood and Galway at the Racing Post. But for now, enjoy the week and the very best of luck.